So this video is going to show what I expect of a horse when I'm just warming up and riding around. Really, anytime I'm on a horse. I feel like sometimes people don't want to pay attention to the little things when they're riding around because they don't want to pick on their horse. And I get that, and I appreciate that in a person, but I feel like you can ask your horse to do things without picking on them, and you can reinforce your cues without picking on them. And if it's just something you do every day and the horse just expects that, they're going to respond to your cues when you get on them, you're not picking on them. And also your response is really important. If every time you correct your horse, you do it aggressively, then, I would consider that to be picking on them. But if you just correct them firmly but consistently, then that's not upsetting to them. It's just like a kid in school. You wouldn't let your kid just make mistakes on everything because you don't want to upset them. You would just show them how it's wrong and how to do it right, and just be consistent with that versus, you wouldn't yell at that kid and, slap their wrist or something every time they made an honest mistake. So it's the same with horses. So now that I already talked through this section of the ride, I will start over. So what I'm doing here, when I pick up an inside rein, I expect a horse to give their nose down into the inside a little and soften. And I also want them to give me a little arc in their ribs and to kind of step up under themselves with their hind inside leg. And I expect this instantly. If I were to just grab a hold of him pretty hard, it would be hard for him to be soft immediately because, if it were a harsh cue. But if I just pick up a rein, they should do this pretty instantly. So right there is a good example of how he doesn't at all. He braces against my hands when I pick up that rein. And, that's not the worst response ever, but it's not great either. Because my theory is whatever response you have at home in a low pressure situation when you're just riding around, when you go to a barrel race and ask that horse to run, you're going to have a fraction of that response. So at home, if he's, kind of stiff and takes a couple strides to respond, at a barrel race, that's going to be like 4 strides and you're going to be past the barrel. So that's why this stuff is so important when you're just riding around at home. So again, if that happens, I'm not going to punish him for it. I'm just going to ask him to respond and keep working on it. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I kind of just let him relax and lope out on a loose rein and then just keep asking for it. And this isn't the kind of thing that you're going to do 5 times and then say, well, it just doesn't work, or he's just not doing it, or I got to go to the pattern. This is training a barrel horse. Like, you don't have to have a barrel in front of you to be working on the barrels. I get pretty frustrated with people that just want to go straight to the pattern because this is barrel work. You got to have your horse soft and responsive and understanding your cues. Like, that is what barrels are. So just continuing to do that. And like right there, that's pretty nice. You can see how I get that nice arc. That's really what I'm looking for. I like my horses to have a nice arc in their body when I pick up only the inside rein. And of course that takes time. You got to teach all those things individually and then put them all together, and then takes a ton of repetition to get the horse to where they will give their face, give you a little arc in their ribs, and kind of step that hind end up under them when you ask a little bit with your leg and body position. But it works really slick because obviously if you can do all that with just kind of picking up your inside rein a little bit, and if I arc my ribs, then that makes for a great barrel pattern if that's all I got to do to get a little arc out of him. So then at this point, I was pretty happy with that for now. That's something I'm going to do every single day I ride him for the most part. That's another thing that I really try to caution people about is these aren't drills. This is how you ride your horse. You are training or untraining your horse with every single stride that you're ever on that horse. I don't care how old that horse is. Of course, the older they get, the more solid they get. They're going to, it's going to take longer to train or untrain them. But you don't have to have a barrel drill. Just ride your horse correctly and pay attention to what you're doing, because all of this is training, and all of this is training for barrel racing. So anyways, I was pretty happy with that, so I decided to move on to something else. Okay, so this is the next thing that I see a lot of. If your horse doesn't do anything when you roll your hips underneath of you, that's a problem. Again, same thing. If your horse can't stop from a trot or a nice slope at home when you just rock your hips under and sit, when you get to a barrel race and your nerves and your horse's nerves and, the noise and everything, and you run your horse at that barrel and expect him to rate when you sit, it's not going to happen, and that's all there is to it. So I really challenge people to pay attention. This stuff matters at home, even when you think you're just warming up, it matters. And the tough thing is on these videos is I don't do a real exaggerated sit, especially on a finished horse, so sometimes it can be hard to see, but I'm sure anyone that, does this as well can hopefully see it, but I think people watching this will understand that it's kind of hard to see, but it's there. My other thought on sitting or asking for a barrel horse to stop, I do that a little differently, and if someone does it differently than I do, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you about it. In my opinion, I need a horse to have a very soft, relaxed stop and rate. It's different than, say, like a rope horse stop or a ranch horse stop, because I don't want them just stiffening their legs and stuffing themselves into the ground stiffly and as quickly as possible, because that's just not what we do on the barrels. That being said, I train horses that are, barrel and pole horses. I don't train rope horses, ranch horses. So I understand that, if you do, or if you have a horse that's a multi-event horse, you may have to do this different, and that's fine. This is just what I do and what works for me, what I believe in. So I want them to drop their hind end. I want to be able to feel them run their hind end up under them, no matter how fast we're going or how slow we're going. And I want them to stop quickly, but I want it to be soft. I want their head to be soft, and I want their feet to pedal a little bit, almost more like a reining stop, I guess. I don't want them to ever take more than 1, 2 to 3 steps to stop, depending on how fast we're going. But I want it to be very soft, and I want them to just melt into the ground, because at the barrel, when I rock my hips under, that's what I want. I want them to just softly melt into the ground, but stay relaxed, because then, if they can do that, they're probably going to have a nice turn. But if they, go in there and they're stiff-legged, and the only time you ever stop them is, you do it stiffly, then it's going to be pretty hard for them to figure that out. The other thing that I really challenge people with is to not use their hands at the same time that you use your seat. I see this a lot, and again, depending on your discipline, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I really believe in using your hips and your legs first, and then if they don't respond to that, then a fraction of a second later, you go to your hands. And, I'm only going to give them 1 or 2 steps to respond to that, more if they're a colt, but, on a finished horse, they should feel that immediately and shut it down. But always give them the cue from your seat and your legs first, and then go to your hands if you need. I don't think it's fair to, when you use your hands at the same time, and you see people sitting, but really all they're doing is getting really solid in their seat and bracing their legs so they can just pull that hard. Like, they almost just set the horse straight down into the ground with their hands, and they think they're sitting, but really they're just giving themselves a whole lot of leverage to yank on that horse's mouth. And I don't think that works in the barrel racing at all, because can you use both hands at the barrel? Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you need to do that on a green horse. A lot, that can happen. Absolutely. I do it too. But on a finished horse, if you're trying to be fast and you have to use 2 hands to rate that horse, they're going to stiffen, and it's just not going to be smooth. And if it's not smooth, it's not fast. So that's how I apply this. If someone comes to ride, I really expect them to be fair to that horse and give them a nice cue with their seat before going to their hands. But if that horse doesn't respond, then you're going to go to your hands and you're going to make it uncomfortable for them so that they learn that, hey, if I just, sit when she sits, and she's not going to pull on my face. So you'll see as I'm doing this that he's not really responding much at all. Sometimes he does a little bit. And he does elevate his head. It's not terrible, but it's not pretty. But that's kind of a secondary concern for me at this time because I am using my hands somewhat aggressively, more so the longer we go and he's not listening. That's kind of a secondary concern to me. If I back him up, I want him to end up softening his face. But my primary concern with this is getting him to listen to my seat. So, and if he does that and I don't have to use my hands so hard, then he's not going to feel like he's surprised and, elevate his head. So, okay, so that time I gave him a pretty fair amount of time to respond, and there was just absolutely nothing. So, and when I'm backing a horse, I always want to get them to where they end up backing nicely, where they'll go ahead and rock their weight back and get a little softer on the front end and give me some nice quick steps and not just dragging. So how I use backing when I do this, if they don't listen to me at all, like there's just no response, then I'm probably going to back that horse up a little bit because I want it to be harder for him. And a nice backup where, like I said, they have their hind end under them and their feet are moving and they're not just completely bracing on my hands. That position is the same position that I need when they're stopping and reining. So it's also kind of a way to get their weight back on their hind end and remind them that they're supposed to stop with their weight on their hind end too. If a horse responds to my sit really, really well, like if he just plants it, then I'm not going to back up at all. And, that was great. That was perfect. Thank you. Make that easy for him. So that's kind of how I use backing when I'm working on a horse's stop and rate. That time, that was really nice. You could see he just kind of stuck a hind leg under him and he just stopped, and that was great. So first I rewarded him, but then he just went straight into walk. He started to walk off, unfortunately. So that's why you can see there, that was really nice. He just stuck that hind leg under him and stopped. But then he tried to walk off, so I had to correct that because I don't allow that in my horses either. I really need my horses to be able to stop and relax because that's so important in my training, because I feel like if I give them, 10 seconds or more, depending on whatever I feel like we need to do, to stop and sit and think about something, they learn so much faster than if I just go from one exercise to the next with no stopping whatsoever. So especially if they do something really well, or the exact opposite, if I had to really tune on them for something, if I stop and let on a loose rein and just let them stop and think about that for a minute, they train so much faster than if I just am constantly moving and going from one thing to the next. So, but in order to do that, I need them to actually stand still and think and relax. So from there, I also started throwing in just just asking him for a basic turnaround. I'm also really, really particular about what I call following my hand. And again, this isn't a drill. This is how I ride. Every stride, this is just how I ride and how I expect my horses to respond. So if I move my hand over like that, that means turn. Bring that front end around, and it needs to be quick and fluid and relaxed. And I don't want to have to pull on their mouth much at all, depending on how hard I want them to turn. If I need to get a really hard turn out of them, then, I might need to make contact with their face, but if we're just walking around and I move my hand like that, they should be going. And so, again, if I can't steer my horse around like that at a walk at home, how's he going to steer around a barrel, at the barrel race at a run? Like, he's just not. You're going to have to pull on his face way hard. And then they're going to be stiff, and their turn just isn't going to be as nice as if they would just kind of turn off of a real gentle cue. So I started throwing some of that in too at this point. So there, he's doing a really nice job of kind of stopping and thinking about what the heck we're doing. So when I'm backing a horse up like that, my body position is my hips are still rocked under. My calves and feet are off of them, kind of like you would in a stop. I do use my calves to try to increase their speed if I need to back them up, but it's a different cue than a forward cue because my feet are more forward, and I kind of just create motion with my legs. I guess it does feel different to the horse than asking them to go forward. So I use my hands as needed, but I really try to get them to where if I sit, like right there, if I sit and take my legs off and create that room for the horse to back up, I really like to get them to where they will, like there, he did really, really nice. When I also like to ask for backup with my body first before engaging my hands, exact same as a stop. The stopping and backing are really very similar movements and similar cues. So right there, I take my legs off and I sit, and he kind of just came right back on his own. That's fantastic, and I really work towards that too. Because he needs to know what that motion even means. He needs to understand that motion means come back to me. So you can even do that from a standstill to really isolate that cue and make sure they figure that out. Okay, so here I start going back to the following my hand, as I call it. So I don't make contact with the horse's mouth right away. I ask with my hand first. They can feel the neck rein, and they can also feel that inside rein coming off. And that's really what I want them to respond to. If they don't, then I will make contact with their mouth and use my outside leg. I really like to, especially on a horse like this horse is just straight running bred and has a lot of forward motion. I really like to come back to my hip when I'm asking for that, because it keeps my body position good. If I bring my hand back to my hip when I need to make contact with their mouth like that, it brings my body back. Whereas if I keep my hand forward and my hand goes straight out while my shoulders are still kind of forward, that's telling the horse to keep their weight forward and keep moving forward as well, which, if you have a radier horse or a horse that you need to keep moving forward around the turn, that's exactly what you would do. So it's not a right or wrong thing here. It's just, if I need to bring the horse's weight back or forward or whatever. So I do like to use outside rein, a little neck rein. I don't like to drag on that rein, but that's a cue that they need to. That's a really good cue that a lot of people forget they can use. So right there, you can see I asked. Right there, I ask. He doesn't respond, so then I do get a hold of his face and say, "Hey, you missed that cue completely." So then, kind of make it a little harder for him, and since he missed that. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm asking with just a light hand cue. If he doesn't hear me, then I get a little more aggressive and I get a hold of his face and use my leg. That was pretty nice there. He responded pretty nice. And when I ask for that, I want their shoulders to move. Like they should just sweep their front end around. I expect them to keep a little bit of arc in their body and in their ribs, just like you would want in a barrel turn. I don't care that they just set their hind end. In this case, I'm working this at a trot. I kind of want them to, their shoulders definitely need to be moving faster than their hip, and I don't want their hip just swinging around. But, a little bit of hip movement is fine or even good. Because in a barrel turn, if they just completely lock that hip down, it looks cool, but it's slow. So they need to keep moving around that turn. So that's why I don't, especially if I'm trotting or loping around or whatever, I don't expect them to just lock that hip down. I don't want them to, actually. Do I want to be able to lock that hip down, for example, at a walk or a stop? Yes, but only if I ask for it. Then we go back to stopping. No response. So again, just because I'm not going around a barrel doesn't mean that I'm not working my barrel horse. I feel like it's pretty common for people at this point to kind of get impatient, be like, man, I've got a barrel to race this weekend. I got to go work the barrels. But if this is what your horse needs, do it. Like, all of this is going to apply to the pattern. And why put this stress on your horse when there's a barrel there? I'm kind of getting after this horse a little bit when he's not hearing my cues. So if I can teach all of this without the barrel there and not put any association with this pressure on the barrel pattern, why wouldn't I? Whereas if the only time I tune on him is when there's a barrel, obviously he's going to get pretty nervous on the barrels because he's like, geez, this is where she really tunes on me. Whereas, if I just set the expectations up that this is just how we ride every day, well, pretty soon they're riding around dang good, and I sound like a hillbilly. They're riding around really well, and none of this is an issue. This is just how you ride around. There's no stress. Then take it to the barrels and let the barrels be an easy, stress-free place for the most part. Starting to give them a pretty good break on some of these times. It's starting to get hot already this morning, so. Okay, so at this point, I'm really giving him more rein and letting him kind of cruise around, letting him be not collected and just kind of cruise around on a mostly loose rein and then seeing what he does. And again, it seems like some people are afraid to do this sort of thing, but if you can't let your horse cruise around at home and still have some control, then, what's going to happen at the barrel race? Either you're not going to be able to run your horse faster than a lope, or if you do, it's just kind of going to be kind of a mess. So do this stuff at home. So at this point, I do kind of start working on his face a little more because he's just kind of throwing it up more than he needs to. So I kind of start working on that a little bit because it's getting a little excessive. His backing itself is nice when he's doing this. He's got his hind end under him and his feet are moving, but he's just kind of pitching his head, and yeah, don't love that. So at this point in the ride, he's starting to get kind of impatient and irritated, which, I don't really blame him. It was getting pretty hot, and, 15 or 20 minutes of focused work is a lot. If this was a super green horse, a colt, I would have, stopped by now. At this point, I was kind of looking for a stopping point. We just hadn't really quite found the right spot yet, and then he kind of started getting irritated and wanting to be done. So kind of just had to keep working through that. So there you can see I'm really using my feet to try to create some motion with his feet. It was a pretty nice little stop there, so I didn't ask for much of a backup. So at this point, since he was starting to get irritated and is getting hot out, I really tried to dial the intensity of everything back, because I think it's really important to end on a good note with every single ride. So if I'm this far into a ride and I'm wanting to find a stopping point, we did some good things in the ride, made some progress, and I'm trying to find a stopping point, but the horse is still kind of frustrated or, a little overwhelmed maybe, I try to dial it back down. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going back to stopping from a walk. So I'm going to really dial this down. I'm going to find something that I know that he can do and do that a few times. Let him end on a win. So I think that's really important when you're wanting to be done with a ride, is to make sure you end on a good note, end on your horse doing something very simple that he can do and that will leave him feeling good about the ride, good about himself, and ending in a frame of mind that you would want to start tomorrow's ride on, I guess is one way to put it. I want that horse to feel, feel like we're on a good note when we get done. So that stop was not good again, though, unfortunately. So looking back, I wish that I would not have even asked for that. I wish I would have gotten off that last time, but I didn't. So here we are. And I did sit on him for a while and let him, you could see he's still kind of twitching around a little bit. So I sat on him for quite a while. I didn't ask for anything after that. I just sat for a while and waited for him to relax and then got off. So I hope that helps. Just kind of a rundown of what I expect, how I expect a horse to ride around, and why it's important to pay attention to this stuff when you're riding around. Again, I just really want to reinforce, these are not drills. This is how you ride your horse, and it's going to make a night and day difference on the pattern. It's going to make it to where the pattern is simple and easy and fun for the horse. It makes a huge difference in the horse's mentality towards the barrel pattern too. So I hope this helps.